Let's talk about new features in Rapise 6.3. Besides over 300 minor updates and fixes, Rapise 6.3 has gained bulk improvements in several key directions. The collection of supported platforms was expanded with support for recording and playback of web version of SAP UI 5. This is a full-featured SAP UI 5 test recorded by Rapise. We play in it, login into the cockpit, launching an application. It's in our case, in your case, maybe just application login. It's some product management site, and we may edit a product, interact with input fields, with combo boxes, fill data, save it. So this behavior is identical to the behavior when you do it manually. Look at the report. Playback successful, and here is the log. We see growing demand in deepening the support of increasingly developed, powerful, and flexible automated testing frameworks created by our customers and partners. Rapise profile contains configuration of web browser or mobile device used for the test execution. We upgraded browser profiles in Rapise. So now when you create a new profile, for example, I want to have the profile that forces browser to use physical click rather than event. So I take the Firefox as a base, duplicate it, and now there is a checkbox local. So I'm setting it, and my profile will be saved locally. This means here in the drop down it's under local section, and if I go to the folder where my test is stored, there is a profiles subfolder. So profiles may be a part of my test or my test framework. So my test framework now may be shipped together with Selenium profiles, browser profiles, and mobile profiles. So all may be saved here. So this makes your test frameworks more flexible. Sheet Preamble helps making every RVL row executable. Now it may also load objects, making sheets more universal executable units. Here we have a test framework with root test and number of subtests implementing various scenarios. Suppose that we want to execute something from one of the subtests and we want to do it quickly. If we just open the sheet and try to play it, it will fail. This is because each test in our framework has its own object repository, and we are launching from the context of the root test framework, and it doesn't know about objects. The fix that we may do is to load objects explicitly in the beginning of the sheet. So new feature that appeared in 6.3 is that you may add this load statement by just dragging the object here in the beginning. What you may also see is that after I put this object here, this line is yellow. This means is that it's a part of Preamble, and you will see what benefit it gives. For now, I may just try to play this sheet. And you see that the script is working properly. It's doing something and it's done. Now, since it's a part of Preamble, I may execute any part from this sheet, from this workbook, from this subtest, alone. And this will automatically launch these do-load objects, and all objects will be available. So every part of my test and its subtests are now executable due to this feature. You see, I'm trying to do set text for username, and it succeeded. RVL has explicit parameter types, making scripts more illustrative. Parameter type is also a way to achieve various goals. Now it has one more feature. It's a common requirement to hide or encrypt passwords and other sensitive data. Now it's easily possible by means of the built-in password data type. When I select the password in the dropdown, the field value gets automatically encrypted, so it only decrypts during the runtime. If I want to set new value for the password, I may simply type it here, hit enter, and since the field type is still password, its new value gets also encrypted. Test parameters make tests more flexible. They may turn standalone tests to a building block for a bigger testing framework. In this scenario, the test gradebook calls the test login as and passing some values, some input parameters. There is a way for passing parameters built into Rapise through the params argument to the test function. It may be used from JavaScript using Global.DoInvokeTest, where the second parameter is a JSON statement passed as params. This method is okay for JavaScript, but it's not really convenient for RVL. So we introduced new features that help to overcome this difficulty. First of all, the calling test may now use another function, RVL.DoPlayTest, to call another test. This function supports extra params, so it may allow you to pass additional credentials such as guser and gpassword. Next feature is tester getParam. It may be used within called test to read input values. So input values available not only inside the main function of the called test, but in all sheets in the places where they need it. Overall, it looks like that. If we look at the calling test, we see that it executes RVL.DoPlayTest, and then it supplies extra parameters, which are guser and gpassword. Then, inside the login as subtest, we read these input values using tester getParam and pass these values to the corresponding actions within the login logic. Test configurations help combining test parameters into sets, so that one param configuration name affects the whole group of runtime parameters at once. It's a common requirement to have an easy accessible configuration for a test or test framework. Now we decided to add one more format. In addition to JSON format we have by default, and I'll show you how it can be done. So I'm adding a spreadsheet and calling it config. In this scenario, this is a web test. I want to specify the initial URL for the site I'm testing. And then later I may wish to add some sensitive data such as credentials to this config file. So it may be URL, and I want it to be In this case, the URL I use, but I want to be able to change it anytime. So I'll place it here. So first column is a key, second is values for corresponding keys. It may be user or login, admin, password, which is admin 123 for this site. So I've just created a config. Now I'm going to show you how to access it. So first of all, my goal is to navigate navigator open some URL, and I'm going to use it, and I want to take this URL from the config. So I'm using method global get property, and now the name of the property is a URL. Now there is additional parameter, default value. This is for the case nothing is specified in the config. So let me set it to some value like current one. And now there is a third parameter, config path. And I may say that I want to take the value from the Config.xlsx. So this is the first approach for reading the configuration value. As you may see, these two lines appear to be a bit redundant. I still can use it. I read the value. I'm reading it using variable last result. So this approach works, but there is a shorter path now. I may go to test definition and set the configuration path for all calls to global get property. I'm defining a function test prepare, and I'm adding call to Global.SetConfigPath. So by default, all calls to global get property without use of these parameters would actually access this global config.xlsx, which is handy. Moreover, if I have some value that I want to store between test executions, such as some incrementing counter or anything like IDs of created items, I may use APIs I already have, like global set property. Like unique ID and value, let it be ABC. Now if I just play this test, you will see that it should store the value in the config file. So the test is being executed. And now the config file, if I reopen it, contains a unique ID written by my test. In general, this approach may be used for test frameworks, like here. We have a test framework, we have Config.xlsx containing much more values because it needs more values. It also have merge patient ID, which is last patient ID that were merged. And these values are used in the tests throughout this test framework. We also use test prepare here to set config path to point to this XLSX. In general, this approach may be explained as follows. So we have set Global.SetConfigPath to specify path for config file, and then we may access relevant values. Access means both read and write using global get property and global set property correspondingly. User input is faster and more accurate if one chooses from limited set of valid choices on each step. This is where RVL is good, and in 6.3 it became even better. Sometimes we use functions to implement test frameworks. Functions may easily be called from RVL scripts. In real-life applications, in many cases, parameters have limited number of values. These are application domain specific dropdowns. It may be list of departments, list of types, list of customer categories, and so on and so forth. So it's useful when parameter is selected from limited set of values. For example, in this function, we set the state and we expect the value to be one of the states. And we may have it. So for this parameter, we have this list. Defining such a list is now possible due to the dropdowns feature. So once we have a file called Dropdowns.xlsx, and once we have a column with naming object ID, in this case it's functions dot function name, in this case it's set state dot state name, then this is assumed to be a source for dropdown for the corresponding parameter values. So now we may select a state. Also, this state may then be mapped to some other values such as state code, state number, state capital, and so on. This is described in the documentation. The feature is based on the assumption that next to the drop-down definition, you define other columns with mapped values. And then you use method RVL.getDropDownValue. It's described in the docs. In addition to the drop-downs for your own functions, you may actually redefine the drop-down for any parameter of any built-in functions. For example, for the Global.DoLaunch CMD line, we may define a list of available values. So in this case, if we use Global.DoLaunch, such as Global.DoLaunch here, and we choose CMD line value, we have this list of possible values. So we hope this feature will be useful for building your test frameworks. Usability features are mostly inspired by users who seek to make the working experience more comfortable due to a more convenient and productive tool. The readability of the test script improves when the names of the repository objects coincide with their real screen labels, regardless of the language used. And we did something about it. An object tree has been updated to better support special and international symbols, including right to left and left to right languages. Sometimes we need to see more information. Sometimes the information is redundant and it is better to skip it to save screen space for better use. We are constantly tuning and improving Rapise for better balance. If we have a report displayed in Rapise report viewer, we may see that it contains the full title of the report file that is quite long because it contains a timestamp of the report. We found it sometimes not really convenient because it takes too much space. So we made an exception to this rule. And since we 99% of cases, we only need the last report, the report from last execution, we did an exception to that rule. So the last report is always shown as just report. The report of the last execution. You may hover it to see the full path, and if you then open it from the history after some time, you will see the full path. In other cases, this is just report and it's useful for saving the space. Reporting is crucial for any testing tool. We work on improving ours because reporting is never too good. Rapise report viewer now has reaction to a special keyword TODO. So if some message which output using tester message method starts with TODO, then the corresponding line in the report is highlighted in yellow. If it is an assertion and assertion starts with TODO, it's highlighted in green. However, if we hover over last test execution status, we see that it is counted in the total number of to-do items. This helps to plan your work. This helps to postpone some work for later time and to not forget it to complete these items when needed. So when this item is completed, we just need to simply go to corresponding assertion and to remove this to-do prefix, and this counter will be reduced. Message boxes may be annoying. We know it and we work on it. We changed the way how user is notified when some source file is modified externally. So if I change the file in Notepad that is currently open in Rapise and go to Rapise, so now instead of the pop-up message, which was a bit annoying, we have this sticker message that allows us to either reload or ignore the changed value. Productivity is about repeating routine tasks with minimal efforts. What happens with RapiseLauncher when you reboot the machine? If it is a Spire execution host, then this configuration option may be useful. The RapiseLauncher has the checkbox that enables automatic start of RapiseLauncher on startup. So if you, for example, reboot this machine and log back in, the RapiseLauncher will stay here. Rapise may be effectively used for the RPA, Robotic Process Automation.
This is a demo of Invoice Processing System built with Rapise RPA from Microsoft Dynamics Nav. We've started the robot. The robot monitors a specific folder for new invoices in the PDF format. When a new invoice arrives, the robot sends it to Rapise script. Rapise enters the invoice data into the system using Dynamics Nav client application. Rapise navigates to the list of purchase invoices. It starts a new invoice and enters the vendor name, due date, vendor invoice number, description, quantity, and amount. Invoices with amounts less than $100 are posted automatically. The next invoice is being added. This time the amount of the invoice exceeds $100 and a notification must be sent to a responsible person. Rapise exports the invoice from Dynamics Nav and the robot sends it along with a notification. Let's check the mailbox. We've got one notification for automatically posted invoices. And we've got another one asking for invoice approval. Responding with yes instructs the robot to post the invoice. Once the reply is received, the robot launches Rapise. Rapise finds the invoice by the internal invoice number and posts it. Then the robot automatically sends a notification to the responsible user. Let's check the mailbox again. The invoice we just approved has been posted successfully. The execution report of each Rapise script launched by the robot is automatically stored inside SpiroTest. We can review every step of the execution. For every script run, the robot is stopped, but it can run unattended 24 hours, 7 days a week. Thanks for watching.